So, David, fantastic to be chatting with you around case studies and, that whole concept at a listing appointment of promises into evidence.
Sure.
And a lot of the time that makes clients feel comfortable with who you are and how you're operating. Mm-hmm. So let's have a chat about how you're using them and how you sort of select them maybe for different kinds of clients as well.
Yep, sure.
Yep.
Listing appointments, I think it's always important to have like for like. So case studies to reflect either the type of home that you're going in to present to or potentially selling, but also price point wise. No point going into a $2 million house or potential value of $2 million and taking in a case study or a relevant sort of information for a $4 million house that you've sold.
And even though it might be a really good methodology,
sure,
it potentially is a reason not to list with you.
Correct.
Rather than creating a reason to list with you.
Yep.
I've seen agents with their favourite case study is a $2 million apartment. Yeah, but someone's selling $1 million home.
Correct.
So it's got to fit like with like. Yeah, I like the way you say that.
Yeah, mixed market, but it's got to be like for like, and it might give the vendor just that little more confidence that he's had experience in that field already, whether it's home style or area or price point.
Great. And if you don't have that listing yourself, do you move from here's what I've sold to here's what we've sold?
Yeah, absolutely.
We language?
Yeah, I think it's use inclusive language of the business, because the reality is you're not going to have handled every single home that you're going to be presenting to that you need to use that example for.
Yes.
So I typically would be using a company sale. As many as mine as possible, because I can talk with a bit more conviction, but if they're not mine, always get a bit of background on what happened from the agent that sold it, I think, before you present the information.
Yes.
Just in case they had friends or family that was at the auction or during the inspection there, or went to the home or had some
bit of a
contact with
turn.
it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think it's always got to be truthful evidence, because you can get found out in some cases. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So when would you roll this out at a listing appointment, do you think?
Look, I'd like to sort of get comfortable, I guess, with the potential vendor first and have a chat about plans, etc. And I'd rather prompt it coming out before they do. It typically would be around towards the end of my listing presentation, when I'm trying to sort of come down to the sort of, the outgoings or, numbers of the appraisal. So costs, outgoings, commission and pricing. Obviously a campaign book that we use, which is basically an example of a campaign from start to finish. So pre-production photos right through to opens and auction. It's an example.
And you've got these in visual sort of
absolutely a bound book.
Fantastic.
For each property that we do, and we can bind one, for whatever home we're going into. So I bring that out towards the end to show examples of the end sale result that was achieved at auction, and then work back to the authority level that it was quoted at. And make relevance there. Typically, if it was quoted at the right range, it will hopefully sell in excess of that with right competition, but attracting the right market, but also examples of a similar home that's sold price point wise in what marketing they spent. Give an example on the authority and so on. So the visual is very powerful, because they're going, well, this is confidence that the same type of vendor has done this. Yes. We should be doing the same, because they achieved such a great result. Hard to argue when you've got evidence like that. It's pretty damning.
Absolutely. So how long would a walkthrough in a case study be at the listing appointment?
Well, it depends. You might bring up a couple. So sometimes I do up a little agent report, sheet, and essentially talks about numbers of people through the home, contract requests, building inspections, and just dot out every little key indicator of the campaign, how much over reserve and so on. So basically, it's a very quick summary of that campaign, and you might do 4 to a page, and that's very quick. And I'll leave that with them and say, look, here's what we did here. It's quoted at this. This how many people came through. Marketing spend was this, and so on. It might have a visual of the house as well, but I'd probably spend 2 to 3 minutes on each case study, quick run through it. I'd talk about it very quickly, and then ask for questions, I guess. And
then the book version, it sounds like that's more detailed.
Correct. Yeah. Very detailed. So the book, I'd probably spend at least 10 to 15 minutes on it. And if there's points that I want to emphasise, you might spend more on that and skim through others. So typically it's during the crux of the campaign, from the inspections to the mid-campaign meetings, and the reports in there as well, to the pre-auction report. They're the ones I spend more time on, as opposed to the photography and floor plan. That's easy stuff. Quick visual.
So what happens there as you're going through this? You're doing some confirms. Does that? Do you feel comfortable with that? Do you see why that's important?
Correct.
And so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I think it's important when you throw a bit of evidence out there to go. Do you see how that works, or does that feel comfortable with you? Can you see how that was important? I ask a question, because that means, one, they're engaging, but two, are they understanding?
Correct.
And if they don't, we'll spend more time on it, because it's crucial that they understand the whole process of it, because I don't think many other agents go through as much detail as we do, especially I've never seen another agency that's got a campaign book. I know a lot of our team do in the company, So really what you're doing is you're selecting a campaign that has sold recently that mirrors the strategy recommendations that you're putting forward to this client. Correct.
So they can see it actually roll through from that point of view. High relevance for them, checks along the way, some good visuals in there, and you're really turning, here's the promises that we're making that any agent can make,
correct,
but here's the evidence that we actually do what we say we're going to do.
Spot on.
Yeah, fantastic. Great.
Absolutely.
Anything else around the case studies you want to tip in?
I think the presentation of the material is very important as well. I think
the quality of it?
Absolutely. It needs to be bound. It can't be loose pieces of paper in there. It needs to be all bound together. Quality printing. It needs to have obviously all Marshall White branding on it. All the colours need to be vibrant. Don't have things that the ink's run out in the printer and we're throwing it together. It can't be last minute, especially when you're presenting to homes that are $3, $4, $5 million. It needs to reflect, your style and approach.
Your quality, Marshall White quality, correct, the quality of the property.
Absolutely. So I think the visual needs to be very, very well presented. But I also think the dialogue around it as well. You need to know exactly what you're talking about, and that's why it's so important that if it's not your property that you've sold, that you're using the case study for, know a lot about it.
Get the background.
Absolutely. But if it's yours, obviously talk in great detail and show off that detail. I think it's important, because they're going, geez, this guy is, he or her is so into it. They know exactly the whole step of the way, and it just gives people confidence, I think. If you're very blasé about it and flipping through and going, oh, that was this, it leaves a bit of doubt.
Yes, and in that mode, there should be nothing that they ask you that you say, I don't know that. From that point of view.
Absolutely.
Now, talking about this, the bound case studies, do you on a monthly basis say what properties are relevant next case studies?
Yeah, I try to keep it fresh. I think that, I always have a generic one, around sort of $2.5 million in my listing kit.
Because that's relatively a lot of the sweet spot of your core market.
Our average sale price, absolutely, and it's a period home, which is a big market that we sort of sell in and I guess specialise in. So I'll always have one just handy, just in case I need to use some bit of evidence from that booklet. But I always try and, I think the preparation for your presentation is paramount. So, if I'm setting up for a presentation that's on Friday, I'll start talking about it Monday, Tuesday, and going, what do we need for that? And make sure I'm happy with the material by Thursday, so I don't have to make any changes last minute, and I'm ready to go, as of Thursday for the Friday meeting.
Yeah, great.
In fact, you probably want to be adding to things additionally as opposed to changing what you've already done. So I think that's very important, to make sure that it's all ready to go before the last minute, and that I think alleviates any mistakes at spelling or etc. in the documentation, which is not a good look.
It is certainly not a good look.
No, horrible.
Hey, David, it's been fantastic. I know you're thinking, well, where does this fit in the process? It's an incredibly important part of the process, and an essential part of the Marshall White Way. And I think for you and for the rest of the team, when everyone embraces this and utilises case studies in a super effective way, it'll make a massive difference to, one, our win rate, and two, the confidence that clients have in doing business with us.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers.